Okay. Okay, we're now being recorded. Cool. All right. We have already about 18 people online. That's a pretty good number. So let's start slowly. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Mafalda Pinto. I'm from the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department, SDCC, and I'm a water and sanitation specialist. I'll be your host for today. And I have the pleasure to introduce our speaker for this session of the Circular Economy webinar series, Xa. She's a program manager at the Philippines No Plastics in Nature initiative from the WWFP Philippines. Sorry, I have a project that's it's the WFP, so I just got confused there. WWF Philippines. So Za has been working on this. She's the manager from this project. She's been working with them for a few years now. And she has a bachelor's in psychology and master's in environment and natural resources from the University of Philippines. She's going to be talking to us about circular solutions to address plastic pollution in the maritime industry. So you're most welcome, Sa. Just a little short introduction on the circular economy group. So there's this working group at ADB where we're spread out through a lot of teams and sectors and divisions, and we're all working together to mainstream circular economy solutions. And one of our activities is these webinars. They happen every few weeks, and we try to get a wide range of speakers that show all the spectrum of circular economy and the different perspectives that you can look into it. So I hope you enjoyed this session. It is very interesting. And without further ado, I'm going to call Sa to start her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Mafalda. So let me just quickly share my screen. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to this session. I'll be sharing with you our project, our Clean Ports, Clean Oceans, Improving Port Waste Management in the Philippines, but I'll be also tackling some solutions that are applicable outside the Philippines. So this session is about circular solutions to address plastic pollution in the maritime industry. So maybe a lot of you are asking, why is it important to address plastic pollution? And I cannot emphasize enough the importance for us to focus on this environmental issue. These are some of the facts that are already out there, how it is related to the global emissions. It's already contributing to about 2.3% of the total global emissions in the planet. We have already threatened 800 species with plastics ingestion. We are already at 11 million tons of plastics that are entering the ocean every year. And then it is projected that it will quadruple if we don't do anything at this point. So there are already a lot of statements, a lot of facts, a lot of studies that are being out there. And one of which is that they're saying that 80% of the plastic pollution are caused by land-based sources, meaning like the coastal lines, it's related to waste management, but 20% are related to sea-based sources. And what are these sea-based sources? They're saying that it's mostly from the fishing gear and from the ships. And this is where the maritime industry comes in. We have the ports that is connected to the land, and we also have the ships that are in the open sea that are doing their transactions there, and we need to work together in terms of addressing potential sources of plastic waste leakage in this industry. So what are the general facts in terms of the maritime industry? So as I mentioned, about 80% of plastic waste comes from land-based sources. There are about an estimate of 1.75 billion plastic bottles used on board ships every year. And ships usually when they go into ports, they don't usually know what happens to the waste that they put into the port. And majority of the goods that we have right now in the planet are transported by ships. And an estimate would be like there's about 58,000 vessels right now in the planet and over 6,000 ports. So there needs to be like a plan on how do we address or how do we work with this industry in terms of addressing plastic pollution. In the Philippines, let me give you like an overview of what is happening in the country. So say for example, like a ship berths into like the Philippine port. And this is the situation. It is important to learn about the solid waste management system in the country that you're going to, of course, for the ships. And in the Philippines, it has been estimated that Filipinos are consuming like 2.15 million tons of plastics. And this is something that we were able to generate in consultation with, we have our technical consultant, AMH Philippines. And out of all this consumption, let's say an estimate of 20 kilograms of plastics are consumed by every Filipino per year. Only 9% of those consumption is recycled and 35% leaks to the open environment. So some of the factors that were also learned from or we saw it from that study is that there's limited separation of high value plastics or high value recyclables at the household level and also from different sources. And the recycling capacity in the Philippines are actually sometimes, not really sometimes, but are insufficient for high value recyclables. There's also a factor of being an archipelagic country, given that most of the operations or most of the recycling facilities are concentrated in the mega cities in the country. So it actually leaves out the other municipalities or the other islands that needs to also address the waste that are being generated in their area. There's also like an increase of volume in terms of the low value plastics. So this would include like the sachets, the composites, and these are usually there's no because of the logistical requirement to manage this type of waste, they are usually disposed of and usually leaks into the open environment. So I think in terms of the maritime industry, there needs to be like an alignment on how the country is also managing the waste that they are generating. And this is actually just an overview of what is happening in the country. And most likely, I don't know how it will be related to the other countries and how they are managing their waste, but definitely we're seeing that it is a factor for some of the shipping companies in terms of selecting where to go for their transportation or for their logistics. There's also a factor given that ports are connected to the land. So apart from a country level, there's also, well, in the Philippines, we have these local government units. So in the Philippines, there's a ban on single-use plastics in ports. So passengers can't use single-use plastics when you are inside the port. But the weird thing is when you go out the port, it depends on the local government unit if you can still use the single-use plastic. So there's no like alignment in terms of like the plastics that you can use or the materials that you can use in certain areas. So say for example, the city government that you are in, they are banning a certain plastic, let's say like the plastic bag, they're banning it. But when you enter the port, it's not something that is, it's not one of the things that they are banning inside the port. So there's like a misalignment, and there needs to be like a coordination, not just at the within the port government agencies, but also with the local government units that they are in. So yeah. And also, when we look at the country, it's important, as I've been mentioning, the importance of seeing how's the solid waste management system in that country. And in the Philippines, you'll see that we only have like 11% of the total required number for the Philippines. So it's also as a challenge say for example, it's already being it's already a challenge in terms of accommodating the waste that are being generated in all of the local government units in the country. So come to think of it, bringing in more waste from through the maritime industry, which is a big industry as well in the country, it's also adds into the challenge of where to bring it. So it's important to also ensure that waste are segregated and recyclables are brought into like ambulant buyers. So what the project did is we first scope what is happening in the country. What are the types of waste that are generated in all the ports, in all the vessels that are berthing in our country. So you'll see here, this is a 2021 data. So this is during pandemic, and you'll see that there's like an increase, or not really an increase, but there's a high volume or high percentage of recyclables. There's 55% of recyclables in all, if you look at the different ports that we have in the country. For vessel generated waste, you'll also see that, well, a big portion are residuals, 45%. And for the recyclables, it's 31% are recyclables and 14 of which are plastics. But when we look at how it's being managed at the country right now, we totaled, or we combined, the vessel generated and the port generated waste. We only see that out of all the recyclables that are being generated, both whether from ports, whether from vessels, only 4% reach the junk shops. So junk shops are areas wherein we can sell the recyclables in the country. So even if it's 55% recyclables for port generated and about, like, I remember correct, 31% recyclables for the vessels, only 4% of that total percentage or total volume reaches the recycling facility. So this is problematic given that most of the waste that are now being generated in the maritime industry will most likely end up in the disposal area. And as I mentioned earlier, we haven't really reached the number or the required number of sanitary landfills in the Philippines. So this is very problematic and we need to do something about it. So for this project, that baseline study is actually part of a project that we are implementing with the Grieg Foundation. So it's a 3-year project. It started in October 2020, and we have been working to reduce at least 50% of plastic waste leakage in 3 Philippine ports. So we have the Manila North Port, the Port of Batangas, and Port of Cagayan de Oro. And you'll see here that we are focusing in 3 types of waste. So the port-generated waste, the vessel-generated waste, and the community-generated waste. So why is there like an inclusion of community-generated waste? So community-generated waste, so these are the waste that comes from adjacent communities in the ports. So there are instances wherein there are very close communities, or even inside the port premises. So these are also some things that we looked at for this project. So what we did is, before like implementing any solution, we tried to look at what are the solutions out there, not just in the Philippines, but in the entire world. What are the different solutions that are being implemented in the maritime industry? So we tapped Deloitte for this one, and we categorized with them the different solutions, whether it's closing the tap, closing the loop, stopping plastic waste leakage, clean up, and training. So if you look at the different solutions right now, there are actually quite a number of solutions that we featured in this report. I think we can readily share this after this presentation. So for the closing the tap, we see that there are ports that are already banning and restricting single-use plastics, and we saw this in India action. So what we did is that for every solution, we looked at its environmental impact, its social impact, or how we are involving like people or communities, economic impact, of course, if there's like economic value in the solution that that is being implemented, and the opportunity to scale it to other ports and ports or maybe shipping companies. So for the banning, we saw that there's really a high potential for environmental impact. There's low in social and economic, and this is very scalable. And I think in terms of banning single-use plastics, this has also been implemented in the Philippine ports, by Philippine ports. So what we're doing is we're helping the, it's important to ensure the implementation of the ban. In the Port of Brisbane, so what they do is they implement like zero waste to landfill. So instead of bringing it to the landfill, they try to find or to implement ways to cut it and recycle instead. So definitely in terms of environmental impact, there's high to it, but there are low in terms of social and economic impact. And in terms of scalability, there's been, we saw that it's not that scalable. So all of the solutions here, these are captured by Deloitte. And what we did is that we just asked them to pull in all the types of solutions that we can find in all ports, because there's no platform right now that consolidates all these solutions. So we took the time, or we took the opportunity to consolidate everything in this report and kind of see what are the things that we can scale or adopt or implement in the Philippines. But not necessarily all solutions needs to be like circular, or these are the solutions that we will already be implementing, but just to kind of see the pool of solutions that are already being implemented in different ports. So in dealing with the maritime industry, we saw the importance of working with fishing gear and litter. So there's like a big discussion about marine litter in the maritime industry. And we saw programs that are addressing or like buying, working with communities to buy back or to recover fishing gear and turning it into something, turning it into a product. So we saw this in South Korea, in Thailand. So these are some of the things that were implemented or that we were able to scope in this report. There's also like a solution on aligning the waste bins, matching the marble into the port. As mentioned earlier, there's need to be like an alignment between the ports and also the ships. Sometimes the waste bins, the colors are different when it's on the ship, it's on board the ship, and then when they go to the port, it's a different kind of colors. It's a different kind of waste management system. So there needs to be an alignment, and this is what the port of the jerk. Hopefully, I was able to mention that correctly. But what they did is to kind of match it so that it would be easier for people to practice segregation and do the recovery after. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of solutions that you are able to see. There are also ways to stop plastic waste leakage. And there are a lot of solutions on cleanup activities and actually engaging communities or even piloting different equipment to sort of recover the waste that are in the bay or that are in the port. So for stopping plastic leakage, some of the solutions that we're able to see is that providing incentives, establishing partnership, so that they get to like support the islands. I think this is in the Pacific. So they wanted to support the different islands so that they can recover the waste and the waste will not accumulate in those islands, and bring it where there's a recycling facility or there's a facility to manage it. So there are a lot of like floating receptacles that we're able to see, a lot of equipment being tried in different countries. So these are some of the solutions that are already out there. So and I would say they're already tested in different countries. So for training, there are also a lot of some solutions wherein they really campaign for 3 Rs, they push for a data collection system. And of course, it is important to also raise the awareness of employees in ports and aboard the maritime industry. So in the baseline study that we did in the Philippines, these are some of the recommendations that we were able to provide. So one is like, there's a need to, we have a lot of plans already. We have a lot of programs or a lot of policies, a lot of direction, a lot of laws. But now the question is how it is being implemented and adopted. adopted and implemented actually. So there's need to be like a stricter implementation of these plans and better team coordination and teamwork among stakeholders. So in the Philippines, there are different government agencies assigned to different parts of the maritime industry. There's a government agency for shipping companies. There's a government agency for ports, and there's another government agencies that ensure the implementation or ensuring that the coastlines are clean, and another government agencies for overseeing all the environmental issues and how it's being addressed in the country. So there needs to be like better coordination and teamwork among stakeholders, and it's important to not leave out any of them, because sometimes it's um they are very dedicated to their mandate. So if ever we leave out just one of the stakeholders, then we're missing a part of the entire maritime industry. So I think it's also important to push for better data management, and because data is also very important in terms of identifying what would be the next step for the policy, or what policy would build on the current policies that are already being implemented. We also push for like having a fully functional materials recovery facility, because definitely in the country it is important to have this area wherein waste are segregated, and it's an area wherein we ensure that waste are being brought to like recycling facilities. Installation of trash traps, so that for all the drainage outfalls, and then also monitoring and utilization of plastic waste, and IEC campaigns and standardization of waste bin color coding scheme. So you see that in terms of all the solutions that already being implemented by different ports, these kinds of align with some of the recommendations that we were able to generate in the baseline study. So I think it's important that whenever we identify any solution or we want to like engage the maritime industry and put forward like a solution, one is there needs to be a solution to close the tap to kind of reduce or eliminate the unnecessary plastics, to close the loop or finding ways to kind of um, uh, ensure that it enters again the system or the plastic value chain, and then stopping the leakage. I understand that there are already plastics in the ocean, and it's also important for the maritime industry to take part in recovering those waste so that it don't accumulate in the ocean, because it's also affecting them in terms of navigation. Other than that, it's also important to have like alignment with the ships and also the ports, training, and also cleanups and monitoring. So what are the different activities that we implemented in the country? So these are some of the solutions that we piloted in our project sites. So as I mentioned, our project sites are in Manila North Port, in the Port of Batangas, and the Port of Cagayan de Oro. So fortunately, so the Philippine Ports Authority that governs all the ports in the Philippines, so they banned the use of unnecessary or single-use plastic. And these are some of the plastics that they are banning at the port. So plastic spoon, plastic cups, plastic stirrer, and plastic straw, and then plastic bag inside a port. So the challenge now, as I mentioned earlier, is that not all cities would be banning the same types of plastics. Some of them would not actually use the word ban, but would say that they are regulating the use of these types of plastics. So we are also trying to align it with the city policies. Wherein so that the passengers will not be confused, the employees will not be confused, and also the vendors whenever they go out of the port. All the things that are banned or are regulated within the port are also those that are being regulated when they go out to the city where the port is in. And maybe this is also something that we're trying to also push for the ships, but definitely when we try to push for ban, it is important to implement it gradually, not that, say, for example, the next day all things will be banned. And we need to kind of let people breathe. Say, for example, one day, maybe ban it for a day, and then kind of expand it to 3 days until people are already have already integrated it in their habit that, oh, I shouldn't be bringing these types of single-use plastic because it's not allowed in the. And whenever we ban any unnecessary plastic, it is important that we provide a system. So say for example, um, water and in plastic bottles are very common in the ports, and this is something that is not really this is something that is not really very easy to eliminate in the ports, because sometimes not all passengers will be bringing like a reusable bottle or a reusable container. So it is important for us to gradually campaign to bring those kinds of reusable container, and when they bring it, there should be like a system to refill it. So it would be very awkward to ban plastic cups, to ban the plastic bottles whenever when in fact when they enter the passenger terminal, they won't see any area or any water station wherein they can fill in their water bottles. So the next solution is actually implementing a full solid waste management system approach. So it is important to provide them with waste bins, but we should think outside of just providing them waste bin. It is important to think about once they segregate, what will happen to the collection. We should ensure that the collection is also doing segregated collection. And then once we have the segregated collection, what happens next? So it's also important to include in the approach that we ensure that these are actually being recycled. And for this solution, we actually tap a social enterprise price called Plastic Flamingo, wherein we tap them to provide the waste bin, and then also tapping them to provide collection services to ensure that we're only getting the segregated waste, and then using the segregated plastic waste to create different products. And then these products are then again like brought into the system, like we create maybe like waste bins on any other product that can be used again, so that it's kind of forms that circularity or the full solid waste management system approach. So the third one is it's important to connect them to the market. So we've been encouraged to help different ports to establish their materials recovery facility. But before proceeding to establishing one, we need to know where it will end up to. So it's not efforts will just go to waste if ever, say for example, we push for segregation, but then again, once it's segregated, we don't have the market for it. So it is important to build on the market. So whenever we segregate it, there is an endpoint to it. So that's when we decide that, okay, so let's have the facility to bring or to bridge that segregation up to the market. So social and behavior change. So it is important in implementing any solution in the maritime industry. As I mentioned, it's okay to ban, it's okay to regulate, but let's ensure that we are actually facilitating social and behavioral change as we do it. So as I mentioned earlier, it is important to build on the system wherein we can encourage passengers, vendors, and employees to actually reduce the use of their unnecessary plastics. So it is important that whenever we push for social and behavior change, it's not just us telling them to segregate, but actually showing them that bins we have separate bins, and showing them that whenever they segregate or whenever we collect bins or whatever we collect from these bins, it's not mixed together, because that will not facilitate any change from the passengers. So the system should also be ready and should be encouraging in a way that people will change because they see their role in terms of addressing the plastic pollution or contributing to better waste management. So the last solution that we actually implemented is related to incentives. So We partnered with Best Inc. So maybe I need to reshare my screen. I'll just share again, but I would like to share with you like a video that we did wherein we okay, so thank you, Ice. So wherein we tap them to provide incentives for port employees that are segregating. So maybe I'll let Ice play play the video. Thank you.
The Worldwide Fund for Nature and Grieg Group are implementing the Clean Ports, Clean Oceans, Improving Port Waste Management project here in the Philippines. The Port of Cagayan de Oro has been selected because we saw their commitment to implement sustainable solutions to address plastic pollution.
The advantage of the Worldwide Fund and PPA partnership is compliance to the Republic Act 9003. Although gi-practice man siya before, with this program, it is being strengthened.
Cash to Cashback is really driven on giving the capability to be able to provide, to be able to earn additional income. Every time you exchange your recyclables to our centers, we give environmental points or we give cashback. People who will exchange their recyclables will have the power to purchase goods, services, basic commodities through that points.
Nagpasalamat gid mi sa Best kay gamay na among residual waste nga matabay dito sa landfill. Sa among mga finances, ma-reduce pod kay magbayad lang pod gid dito sa landfill.
It is important for the port stakeholders to be committed, and this is something that we wanted to build on to create and implement solutions that can be replicated in all the other ports, not just in the Philippines, but outside the country.
Together
For
no plastics in nature.
for no plastics in nature.
Together for a no plastics in nature.
Yes, and then I'll go back to my presentation. So hopefully you enjoyed that video. So we are actually featuring the solutions that we have partnered with or we have implemented in the project, and that includes Best Inc. So you might ask, what are the lessons learned so far in the project? So the project will be ending this year. And here are some of the things that we learned from this. So one is it's important to respect the mandates for governing agencies and push for collaboration. We encountered how they are very strict, like say, for example, this is not already my jurisdiction, but actually respecting that, okay, that is your mandate. So I need to engage the other government agency and actually push for collaboration. So, and it's important for them to really talk about what will happen next or what they should do together or individually for them to address this environmental issue. The next one is it is important to work with adjacent communities on solid waste management. Although we might or some would see it like a very separate from the port premises, but it is important to still address or to actually acknowledge that that the port is part of a city, and it should also contribute in helping the different communities maybe adjacent to it or to the city in terms of solid waste management. And yeah, the one thing that we really learned is establishing any infrastructure with end markets in mind. So I think the establishment of the end market should come first before doing any infrastructure, because that would be an input to how the infrastructure would be established or the design for that infrastructure. The next one is providing a system for reducing single-use plastics. So I hear a lot of like recommendations or interest in terms of banning unnecessary plastics, but there's actually a road in terms of banning it, and it's not just an overnight solution, but it's actually a process that needs to be considered when doing that. And yeah, last one would be aligning the solid waste management systems practice on ships and in ports. So so that in terms of the solid waste management, it will go smoothly and there will be no any misalignment or miscommunication in terms of management, solid waste management. So that's it for my presentation. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. So as I mentioned, we are completing the project this year. So we're also very excited to share what are the best practices and what are the other lessons learned that we from this project implementation. And yeah, with that, we always say in WWF that together responsible, together possible. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Super, yeah, it's super interesting to see, yeah, the efforts, and obviously I think you finished up now very nicely how it is important to have the coordination from the ships to the ports and then to the communities also outside the ports and further on. We already have a question in the chat, but before getting to it, I also have a question. Terry, excuse me, I'll just ask one first. So what I was thinking now that is it, have you seen, because you talked quite a lot about the disconnect between the ports and the cities, because in the ports they're banned, and then some cities there might be not banning or banning different things. Have you already seen any influence from your project to the cities? Are cities becoming a bit more amenable to get this alignment?
Yes, at first, cities would see ports as a separate sector. They don't usually talk with each other, similar with the different, I would say, government agencies related to the maritime industry. But through time, we were able to like facilitate conversations. And what we did in WWF Philippines is that whenever we have a port, we also have a project with the city. And we engage the city in all of the industry roundtables so that they get to see that, oh, in terms of decision making, we also have a say in terms of how things should go in the ports, given that they are inside the city. So facilitating that coordination among the stakeholders would be really helpful.
Great, thank you. Okay, now, Terry, shall I read your question or would you like to come in?
I'm afraid that, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for this very interesting presentation, and then actually very relevant to what ADB is trying to do in the regions. I think that's my one of my I would say kind of burning question from my previous exposure. I actually worked in hazardous waste as my first job back in 30 years ago. So at that time, one of the key working in Hong Kong. So we have a lot of ship, and then I have a lot of the marble waste to be received and cleaned. But there's many ship they don't report, and then they just illegal dumping. So in the case of the plastic waste, how can we learning from the previous lesson like the marble waste to tracking those shit to be really honestly report and checking the plastic waste rather than just dump in the open sea? Because many of our country, including Philippines, are receiving a lot of the international ships, and and unfortunately, most of the international ships are not registered locally, and then they may not be bound by the law of the receiving country until they enter the port. So how can we really having an accountability system to make sure the ship owners did not break the law as they did for the marble race? It takes a lot of time. You have the GPS or the satellite monitoring to you probably know all the ships in the international sea are being monitored quite often by the satellite because of this kind of the illegal concern, whether they will dump. So whether we can also learn from that maybe any good practice from developed countries like you mentioned about Brisbane, Australia or others. They probably already have some kind of a better system which can be adapt to the context of the our developing countries member. Thank you.
Yes, so we were able to actually see already a lot of systems in place. One would be like shipping companies would also have like this system to assess how's the solid waste management system in the country. So sometimes they would use that system to select if they'll be going to that country because of how the waste are being generated. So that's also a lot of shipping companies, including Grieg Star, is already doing that, and I think Wilhelmsen. And regarding your question about monitoring, we actually encountered a solution because we did this call for ready to scale solution. Wherein the solution is called IC. Instead of like the government, I understand that there are government agencies monitoring it, but there's some limitation in terms of doing that. But IC is actually a platform wherein it's a citizen science based. So the seafarers themselves, passengers, or anything, just anyone on board the ships can actually report something whenever they see it. So initially they wanted to use it to see what's the condition of the plastics wherever they are. But I think they are, well, at that time when we were talking to them, they're at the prototype stage, but I think they're already finalizing and trying to pilot it so that they can get data from seafarers to use it for reporting on the situation whenever they're out in the sea. So maybe that's something that we can also like explore. So a lot of innovative solutions are actually already available or are being innovated at this.
Okay, thank you. No, that's interesting to have also a self-reporting mechanism. Yeah, it's interesting. Has it started working, or is it already being implemented, or is still pilot? You mentioned that was pilot.
So last year they're already finalizing a partnership to work on the platform, but they have already piloted it in the Philippines, in Manila to be specific. So they're building on that platform right now. And when we talked to them, that was like mid last year. So most likely it should be already ready by this time, hopefully.
Okay, cool. No, that's interesting. Hopefully, when your program finishes, you'll also report on that. It'd be interesting to know. For the participants here, don't forget, you can raise your hand or drop a message in the chat. There's still time to have to continue this discussion. Don't be shy. In the meantime, I also wanted to know, because you mentioned that you're developing recovery facilities within the ports or nearby to treat the waste. Are these would these facilities? I assume initially they would be within the ports, but for the waste from the ports. But would they also consider waste from the communities nearby? Is there? Are you looking into partnerships?
Yes, so that will where the mandates will come in, because sometimes ports are a bit restrictive in terms of the operations inside. So they would usually like address those that are already generated inside their premises. So in terms of the facility, I think this is only we're doing it we're doing a movable design because it's also not permanent whenever it's inside the port. So there's a chance for them to transfer it to another area, but it's generally addressing like the port generated waste and the vessel generated waste, it depending on the operations or the capacity of the facility. Right now, they're seeing like an increase in the volume of these types of waste, whether from port operations or from vessels. So they're not very keen on accepting any waste from outside. So what we do is, although there are separate facilities, we ensure that there are markets for any facility or whether for any waste that are generated within the ports or even in the communities. So yeah, I think the end markets will be the priority for the project.
Okay, cool. No, yeah, I get it. There's also all sorts of limitations and in terms of also
Yes.
who can be in the ports and all of that security. So I get it.
True.
Um, cool. Yeah. Would anyone like to come in? We're having a very quiet chat box here. But one thing you were mentioning about the end products and the market for those reusable products. Could you go over a bit what type of products you're looking into that would be would these treatment facilities also produce these new the the recovered materials, and what would they be?
Yes, so in the Philippines, we're also in the process of like mapping the different recycling facilities and the products that they are producing. In our partnership with Plastic Flamingo, what they're doing are actually like eco boards. They're doing different like tables and also like small cabinets. So those are the products that they are doing. But there are actually some recycling facilities in the country right now. We're in well, I just saw last week that there's one wherein they're pushing for RPET. So these are what we're doing right now is assessing what are the recycling facilities out there and what is the, I would say, the circular way or the circular facility that we can partner with, because we understand that there are a lot of products and actually there are facilities here who would maybe like even ship out the plastics all the way to another country. So we wanted to ensure that the waste that we bring into a facility, there's a product that comes out of it. So in our partnership right now, it's mostly like the eco boards and then also materials that we are also planning to integrate in the materials recovery facility. So people would see that, oh, that's a plastic waste, or that's where where our plastic waste ended up to. So we also wanted to use the facility as a way to educate people on what happens if they segregate in terms of when they segregate their waste properly.
Yeah. No, I think it's very important for people to, it's seeing is believing, I guess. And it's great that you're also planning to include those facilities for community outreach, and so that people understand better what's happening there. We got a question from Ice. Ice, do you want to come in? I can read it.
Go ahead, Mahoda.
Okay, I'll read it. That's okay. So I think this is about the little the video that you
Yes.
shared that was really interesting. So was the general reception to the incentive program with BEST, and how receptive are the businesses to honoring the credits for goods?
Yes, it was just not mentioned in the video, but actually the environmental points, so they can buy goods, so maybe groceries, and then they can actually use it in some areas where best is present. They can actually use it to pay their electrical bill, water bill, and then well, in the Philippines we have this big e-commerce, so they can use it to pay any online transaction or online purchase in a specific platform. So it's given this benefits, a lot of like the employees are very eager to provide or to bring in their segregated waste, because they see that they are benefiting from it. They see an economic value to it. That's also something that we are seeing in our project. There's an economic value. And then in our partnership, we also ensure that whatever segregation happens, it's collected in a segregated manner, and we assess where it ends up to. And also, BEST would have partner markets. Some would be recycled and recycled. Some would be like brought to certain facilities. So they already have created the market for the segregated waste. So it's a win-win, I would say. And in terms of the businesses, they're also quite supportive of this kind of program, because they see that it's something that encourages people to segregate, and they're very supportive of providing any benefit that the passengers or the users can do with the environmental points that they generate with their waste.
Very cool. And the collection of the waste that goes to this program, it can be from outside the port, right?
Right now we're piloting inside the port, but
Okay.
BEST is actually also doing this solution for those outside the port. So they also have partner communities.
Cool. Terry, you have do you want to come in? Okay, I'll read oh, I see you. Yeah, please.
Just a very simple questions. I think for the port or the biggest shipping industry, they probably have a higher capacity than the smaller one. And in the region, there's many fishery industry is on this is operate in a small scale, and then they generate a lot of the plastic waste on the fishing net, and then it is difficult to use alternative to replace it. So any good practice you find in your program which can be promote on this kind of the applications?
Yes, so there are a lot of solutions that are being implemented. So I shared earlier about the Environmental Justice Foundation. So this is in Thailand, wherein they work with fishing with the fishing communities, and then they buy the fishing gear, and then they bring it to a facility that upcycles it. So the fishing community, at first, when we did the interview with them, the fishing community, they're quite hesitant, and we're like going with it because of the economic value. But in the latter part, I think they were already able to build this habit from the fishermen to retrieve the fishing gear, to help them dry it. And in the community, they even created a way for them to dry the fishing gear, so it would be easier for the facility to process it. So I think that's one of the things that we saw in the scoping of solutions. We also know that there's one in the Philippines wherein they buy from the fishermen the ghost gear and the fishing gear, and then they bring it to a facility. So generally, that's the only solution that we're actually able to scope in the region. But this is also something that we are thinking, if ever the project enters into a new phase or a phase 2, to see or to work with fishing companies, with the fishing industry, because that's also something that we wanted to like help in terms of addressing plastic pollution.
Thank you.
Oh, and before I forget, my follow-up, there's actually in WWF Hong Kong, they tried to pilot like shifting to a different type of like this ice box for the fishermen, and we also are in partnership with one. I don't know if you heard about, for tuna pools. I don't know if I remember this solution, but what they do is instead of using styro foam, so they use like this coconut husk to provide the same cooling effect needed for the fishing industry. So there are already a lot of alternatives that are, or solutions that are being tried out in different countries to shift out from the use of those plastics in the fishing industry. So yeah.
No, that's very cool. Thank you, Sa. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because personally, I don't really work with the fishing industry, so you're raising a lot of waste problems that I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. But I think this project and the lessons learned from it will also be very has potential to translate to different industries, where I was now thinking where waste is going from, or things are going from A to B, and if things go, probably waste will go. So trucking in the industry, trains or whatever, I'm sure there's also potential to replicate some of the good initiatives that your project is doing. Okay, so we're 5 minutes to the hour. If I don't know if there's any last questions that anyone has. No? Okay. So I think we can start wrapping up. Zad, thank you so much. It's really, really interesting, and congratulations on the great initiative to the WWF and also to the Grieg Foundation. If Za shared her email, so I assume she's okay. If anyone has questions, you can email her directly. If you have any questions about this type of sessions, you can email the Circular Economy Group. I see Robbie dropped there our email as well. And thank you everyone for spending this hour with us. Have a rest of a great day. And this will be recorded and will be shared in our website as well. So if anyone wants to rewatch, thank you. Thank you, Za. Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you, Mafalda.
Thank you.
Bye.